नाही 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 असं नसतं लागत काही काय. हो 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 सांग. हो हो चालेल 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 चालेल. ठीक आहे ओके हां बाय. हो हो उद्या चालेल ओके. तुम उधर ही है क्या बाहर फिर? अरे किधर तू नहीं दिखा है अभी तक. नो नो यू जस्ट लॉग इन एज अटेंडी आई विल प्रमोट ना. यू लॉग इन. आशीष को भी बोल जस्ट लॉग इन. हाँ एंड आशीष सुर्वे का उसको भी बोलो कि जस्ट लॉग इन. आई विल टेल हिम. आई विल टेल हिम यू लॉग इन. हाँ हैव यू लॉग्ड इन? हेलो ओके डॉक्टर आशीष नावानी आहे का? थांब मग आय जस्ट आशिष आनंद. आशिष आनंद तुझं आहे का? ओ मग सुसवीरकर काय? ओके मग आशिष आनंद का लिहिलंस मग वाय नॉट आशिष सुसवीरकर? ओके 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 नो प्रॉब्लेम. हां तर आय एम जस्ट प्रमोटिंग. तू आता इकडे पॅनलिस्ट आलो. नाव युअर पॅनलिस्ट. हां सो and Roop is also joining.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
His screen share me stop करूँ का or should we wait for Dr. Desai to join and then I should stop it?
No, let it be.
Let it be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Where is Ashish?
Ashish is
Yes, sir,
also
I'm
there.
here.
Oh, okay, perfect. Chalo. So, yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, now I can see you. Chalo. Gallery view. Yeah. So, where is Joy?
Joy is yet to come.
Okay.
Let me see, unless he has joined in the. No, he's not yet come. Let me call Joy.
You're calling him?
Yeah, I'm calling him.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Morning.
We're waiting.
Ashish, where are you?
Sir,
No problem. Huh,
Yeah.
okay.
No. I mean, which hospitals are you? What are you?
sir, I'm from Mumbai. I'm in Mulund. I stay in Mulund.
Okay. And you're at?
I'm currently in Mulund only. I did my fellowship in movement disorders in Chitra,
Okay.
and then I came here. I did my DM in Jipmar.
Okay. So you're attached to any
Now I'm in
hospital?
Mumbai at Upasni Hospital and my personal OPD. I have just started, sir.
Okay. Okay. Welcome.
So I met you in Hyderabad and then in Mumbai when you and Sudhi sir had organized fine.
Okay. So sorry, I didn't get the
Yeah.
name. So you are in Mulund, and good. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind as and when practice starts.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So Sudhir,
Yeah.
last time since you hosted it, what kind of did you have any further conversation with Joy after about this?
About what?
Uh, he's doing this series.
Yes.
Okay. So is he thinking of anything else beyond this? See, there are 2-3 things that come up to my mind immediately.
He could take. I think we'll talk later. There are lots of participants there.
Wow, idiot. Damn
Yeah.
good.
So this we'll talk between you and me later.
Okay, okay. ठीक है, चलो. I mean, I thought I've sent it on the group. I am going to ask him those questions at the end.
Yes. Okay.
ठीक है?
You can talk on memory and things also.
Yeah. I'll send. We'll do it. तू फोन करा उसको? Did he pick
क्या
up?
किया? उसका कंप्यूटर कुछ बंद हुआ था, so he's joining.
Oh, okay. Yes. Welcome, Joy.
You are able to see Joy sir?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I just saw his panel, but his name is popped up. But
Yeah.
Okay, I've started my video.
Stop sharing now.
Yeah.
Manasi,
yeah, there
stop.
you are.
Yes, yes, I'll do that.
Super.
Got it.
No, my PC was taking some time. It's a little slow.
Okay.
Good morning, sir.
Right. So
Morning,
should I use a share screen?
Please go ahead. I'll just do a quick intro and then we'll start off.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the second in a series of webinars being presented by Dr. Joy Desai on sleep and its implications both in neuroscience and in neurology. Most of us know Joy as a clinical neurologist and an epileptologist, and this interest in sleep is something that that he has been developing, and I'll be asking questions about that towards the end after this lecture is done. So over to you, Joy.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting. My PC is a little screen with you all. And can you see the screen now?
Yes, got it. I'm muting myself.
Right.
I think mute and stop video, Ashish also.
So that great. Yeah. So this talk has been written by me understanding sleep physiology, and I have enjoyed it a great deal, and I hope that the audience also partakes in the enjoyment as we go along. So the traditional understanding of sleep is that it's considered a global phenomenon that affects the whole brain uniformly and simultaneously. And we think traditionally that sleep and wakefulness are considered two distinct, mutually exclusive behavioral states with no gray zones in between. Now, this kind of all or none view of sleep dominates traditional research. And we show different of sleep and talk about it. Electroencephalographic signatures, which help us identify sleep when we are reading an EEG. But to the philosophizing neurologist, the question could be that can sleep occur locally? Can sleep and wakefulness occur simultaneously in regional brain parts? And what is the cognitive correlate of such an occurrence? So that has led to the metamorphosis of a concept which is being explored by sleep researchers in the last 5 years. So slow waves, the hallmark of non-REM sleep, are not uniformly distributed across the cortical surface during sleep, but they occur locally and asynchronously across variable brain regions. So this regional distribution and amplitude is determined by various factors: brain maturation, time spent awake, and mediated in part by experience-dependent variation in synaptic strength. And I will elaborate that in the slides come and show you how simple it is. The new concept is that local low frequency oscillations less than 10 hertz can also occur in REM sleep and sometimes during wakefulness, leading to region specific cognitive errors.
Now, next one is
Or an increase in slow wave activity in posterior brain regions, and this has been linked to dreaming and to unconscious sleep in the wakefulness called daydreaming. And finally, we have some new data which shows that local sleep-like and wake-like activity can coexist in regional brain parts. And this explains the sleep arousal disorders, for example, somnambulism, non-REM parasomnias like sexsomnia, somniloquy,
और sleep का मैंने देखा
eating disorder, confusional arousals, and sleep terrors. So, okay, let's look at this data. And right in humans is slow wave activity, and we know now that this slow wave activity decreases along an antero-posterior gradient, and the frontal brain areas have the highest slow wave activity in adults, and the largest increase occurs in recovery sleep after sleep deprivation, which means that if you're sleep deprived and then you sleep, then there is an increase in slow wave activity. And perhaps this is linked to the function of experiential memory consolidation, which was discussed in my first lecture last Saturday. When neurosurgical patients were studied with implanted electrodes, as a collateral observation, it came to be seen that slow wave activity occurs in
Joy, can I interrupt 1 second? Hello, Joy.
Yeah.
I think the internet connection on your side is not so good. So can you just switch off your video so we don't, it reduces
Hello?
width, huh? And we just see your screen. Let's try that.
Yeah. Yeah. So take away the video. I don't need my video.
Yeah, no, you will have to see on the bottom left side, lower half, there is mute that we need. Of course, we want to hear you, but there's start video, stop video, lower corner of the screen.
Okay. So
Click on stop video.
can I just stop that? Hide
Yes.
thumbnail video. Should I?
1 minute. Can
I don't have the Zoom. Can you block off my video from your end?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Hello?
Yes, I've done. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Good. So we don't need you. Let's just look at the slides. So in neurosurgical patients, slow wave activity, when you've got implanted electrodes and surgery done, has asynchronously and regionally, and this has been published in the space who are interested to a motor learning task, which involves the right parietal region, then there is a local increase in slow wave activity during subsequent without a learning component. And similarly, if you did a prolonged audiobook listening, then these subjects display an increase in slow wave activity in subsequent sleep in the left frontal region, which is responsible for the listening. And after, say, playing a driving simulator game, then slow wave activity increases in the right parietal regions in subsequent sleep. So these phenomena tells you that in the brain, sleep can occur regionally and locally in distinct brain parts. In a recent study that was published in Sleep 2013, if during sleep on the EEG, which displays very regional task-specific localization in the brain. So if you did a language-based task, then following sleep deprivation, while you are doing some work in the left frontal region is impinged by slow wave activity. And if you're doing a visuomotor task, this slow wave activity infringes in the posterior parietal regions. And this results in performance errors in cognition during sleep deprivation. It's almost as if the brain is trying to go to sleep while you are working in a prolonged awake state. And this was published in Sleep 2013. And it's a very elegant kind of study, which shows that this can actually occur when you are sleep deprived. And this diagram shows the two patients who were studied with the sleep slow wave infringement in the left frontal and the left parietal regions, whereas it was normal in the controls. So the question that arises is that does in the human brain, does it take a break when we are sleep deprived, and does local sleep within a phase of wakefulness result in attentional lapses and mind wandering? And this concept has been promoted by various researchers. And essentially, the concept is that if you are working in a sleep deprived manner for prolonged periods of time outside the circadian rhythm determined time for being awake, then regional brain parts can locally develop sleep-like activity, and this results in a drop in objective performance shown in the diagram as the performance drop, or it can result in what looks like daydreaming with a subjective experience, which is different. And this is represented diagrammatically here, where MW on the left shows mind wandering, and MB stands for mind blanking. So it means that if you are doing some cognitive task in a sleep deprived, prolonged wakeful state, then regional brain parts can wander and can make your mind go blank, and it could result in cognitive dysfunction. What about sleep transitions, falling asleep and awakening? So in the falling asleep period, slow wave activity appears first in the frontocentral regions and then in posterior brain parts. And this kind of relative sparing of parieto-occipital regions by slow waves in the early part of falling asleep is thought to be the explanation for perceptual experiences like hypnagogic hallucinations. That means the association areas of the brain are not going to sleep at the same time, and at sleep onset, the individual could experience these hypnagogic hallucinations. And the Italians, Luigi Gennaro, has published this in this paper for those who want to read about it in greater detail. So it's very clear that even when we fall asleep, the falling asleep process is an asynchronous process with the central frontal areas showing an early synchronization with slow wave activity, whereas the parietal areas occur later. And that's represented in the diagram wave activity, whereas in the posterior brain, in the parieto-occipital cortices, the slow wave activity is slower. So at sleep onset also, the thalamus seems to undergo deactivation much before the neocortex. And it's been shown that in the hippocampus, sleep spindles occur several minutes before sleep onset. And this kind of precedes consistently neocortical deactivation. And this is thought to be the explanation for what is known as amnesia for events that occur immediately before falling asleep. And this has been studied by James Wyatt many years ago. And it's very clear that in the process of falling asleep, if we are doing a cognitive task, sometimes when we waken, we may not remember. The other concept which we were all taught is sleep inertia. So what is sleep inertia? Sleep inertia is a transitory hypovigilance and confusion and disorientation of behavior that immediately occurs following awakening in some people. And this has been studied now on EEG, and it's been shown that when you awaken, the EEG is supposed to become fast on awakening, but in posterior parts of the brain, this EEG remains slow for a few minutes. And this persistently slow EEG for a few minutes represents the phenomenon of sleep inertia. So what we've learned is that sleep transitions are characterized by a regionally asynchronous process of electrical phenomena, which are signatures of the state of consciousness, either asleep or awake. And falling asleep exhibits an anteroposterior gradient of slow wave activity, and this is preceded by hippocampal spindles. This could explain anterograde and retrograde amnesia that often accompanies sleep onset. Awakening, likewise, is a regionally asynchronous process with a persistent posteriorly dominant delta rhythm producing sleep inertia. So what happens after sleep deprivation? I told you that after prolonged periods of sleep deprivation, the individual becomes sleepy and displays cognitive impairments. And the waking EEG shows infringement of theta activity in proportion to the period of wakefulness. So there's a concept that microsleep episodes occur for a very short period of time, 3 to 15 seconds, resembling N1 and N2 sleep patterns. And these infringe in localized brain parts in the brain and produce cognitive problems. Hence, there has been increasing enthusiasm to study microsleep episodes as a border zone between wakefulness and sleep in people who are chronically sleep deprived. Why this is relevant? It's relevant because drivers who are sleep deprived, if they experience microsleep episodes, could be at risk for increasing car accidents, as we know. And this has consolidated the concept philosophically that sleep can be a local phenomenon. So from the cognitive point of view, we know that there is a hypothesis now that sensory, psychomotor, and cognitive aspects of behavior can arise as a result during these very brief episodes of being off. So the brain is off for very brief episodes. And from the clinical perspective, one would need high density EEG to pick this up, but it's a concept that is real. And this diagram, it shows here very graphically. So what you see on the left is the time distribution in the top part of the diagram, that from 8 to 8 in the evening as we are awake, the blue shows the homeostatic sleep drive and green shows the circadian drive. And the gray column is showing between 10 and 6 in the morning, the time of sleep. And what you see in the magenta bars in the diagram below is that the number of neurons which are actually off when we are working. So the number of neurons are off in a very small segment when you're awake and working in the day. But when you're sleeping, the number of neurons which are off peak. That's not surprising. But you look at the diagram on the right. If you are sleep deprived and working on your laptop, say for example, at 1 o'clock at night, then by this time there is an increased homeostatic drive to sleep. And therefore a good 50% of your neurons are in the off place. So which it means that though you are working late at night, you are not at your cognitive best. All right, let me share with you a case which illustrates some of these principles. This is a 58-year-old male who's an accomplished, successful interior designer. He expanded his business to regions in the US. He started staying awake till 2 or 3 o'clock. As a routine, he says, I don't need much sleep, doc. That's what he believes. He was in LA for work and then he collapsed on the dais while lecturing. He was transferred to the EMS, found to have sick sinus syndrome, and he was implanted with a permanent pacemaker. When he returned to Mumbai, he kept saying that my brain disconnects from my body, doc, numerous times daily. He's sitting up in my clinic, no change in posture, no sweating, no visible automatisms. He's conscious. And he says, hey, doc, it's happening, it's happening. My body is gone. And the episode lasts for less than 10 seconds. His MRI and 12-hour EEG is normal. There are no spikes during the episodes. There is some asymmetric slowing in the temporal region, which the electroencephalographer reports as non-specific. He has gained 50 kilograms in the last 4 years, and his wife confirms that he's a heavy snorer. He parties harder with weekend binges, and he says, I like my vodka, doc. And on weekends, he has about 7 to 9 vodkas with his pals. He does say that he's tired most of the time, and he does not have time to exercise. Busy program is AH resolved. And on-scene actions had considered microsleep intrusions as a possible explanation for his bodily dissociations. And he had been labeled functional. So the question is, can this actually occur? And this has been studied in this is a very recent paper which talks about microsleep infringements in a person who has severe sleep apnea. And this, they talk about how it can result in performance errors during driving and during cognitive tasks. And the authors from this Italian study discuss the fact that there may be an absence of a correlative pattern on the surface EEG. And this could be explained, as you can see here in the highlighted text, as local sleep starting in subcortical brain structures, which is not visible on the surface EEG before spreading to the cortex. And finally, there is a concept that local sleep could explain non-REM parasomnias. These are considered dissociated states of sleep and wakefulness, and they are classified as sleep arousal disorders, as we all know. So in this study that was published in Sleep in 2016, using high density EEG, it showed that compared to healthy controls, sleepwalkers display a very reduced slow wave activity in a regional brain part, in the cingulate, the motor cortex, and the sensory motor association area, suggesting that while an individual is asleep, in a very regional brain part, the brain can become awake, and that awake state results in, say, somnambulism or any other sleep arousal disorder. We know that in narcolepsy, there is sleepiness, there is cataplexy, sleep-related hallucinations, and lucid dreaming. And many researchers think that the explanation for these could be regionally dysfunctional states of wakefulness in a person who regionally goes to sleep, producing these complex physical manifestations. So what's the summary takeaway that we can take? The summary should be that consideration of human sleep as a global phenomenon that affects the whole brain uniformly and simultaneously is probably now a redundant concept. Because of dense array EEGs and intracranial stereo EEG techniques, we now have unmasked a hitherto unknown aspect of sleep. We now know that sleeping, falling asleep, and waking is a rhythmic but regionally asynchronous coordinated physiological process, somewhat like the keys of a piano that pump segmentally with individual contributions to a whole melody. And this has led to the understanding of phenomena like sleep inertia, hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, parasomnias, microsleep, and sleep associated amnesia at the onset of sleep. And many researchers think that even memory consolidation can occur in a regionally asynchronous manner when we are sleeping, what we discussed in lecture 1, the dovetailing of hippocampal ripples with slow wave oscillations resulting in memory consolidation. And as a result of such increasing enthusiasm in localized manifestations of the sleep-wake state, Francesca Ciclari and colleagues have been studying what happens to the human brain during dreaming. And one of the new concepts that's been floated is that dreaming can occur not only in REM sleep, but also in non-REM sleep due to regional changes in the EEG frequencies, irrespective of the EEG in the rest of the cortex. And as a fallout of this work, it's been shown that people who experience what is called lucid dreaming, where there is a consciousness to the dreaming process, seem to have a functional increased connectivity between the frontopolar cortex and the temporoparietal association areas on functional MRI. So what this is trying to imply is that the connectivity of the brain can be regionally different in different people, and this differing connectivity, in the light of understanding of regional differences in EEG activity during states of wakefulness and sleep, can result in these complex phenomenologies like lucid dreaming. Okay, in the next 20 minutes, let's look at the contributions from circadian rhythms. So Julio Cortázar in 1965 wrote that time enters through the eyes, and everybody knows that. And at that time, we did not really know much about circadian rhythms. So human evolution has produced an endogenous physiologically circadian rhythm which synchronizes daylight cycles. The master regulator for this clock resides in the hypothalamus in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which has a complex mechanism of interplay with peripheral end organ clocks. Aschoff, who's been studying this initially, has said that the primary time giver, or the Zeitgeber in German, is light. And there are other Zeitgebers which result in circadian entrainment: ambient temperature, feeding, defecation timing, social interaction, and physical exercise. The suprachiasmatic nucleus controls the secretion of melatonin by the pineal gland via a special stimulation of retinal ganglion cells when there is loss of ambient light, and melatonin secretion begins between 9 and 11 p.m. and it peaks between 1 and 3 a.m. and falls to the baseline by 7 a.m. by the time we waken. So chronotype is the behavioral expression of the set point of an individual's circadian rhythm. So it describes their sleep-wake cycle in relationship to time. And the two ends of the chronotypic spectrum are called morningness and eveningness, or the lark or the owl, as asked by Sunita in the last lecture. So morningness is characterized by early morning awakening with mental and physical performance that peaks in the first half of the day and going to sleep relatively early, which means at about 10 p.m. And eveningness is the opposite. Now, what is disturbing is that the eveningness chronotype has been associated with a predisposition to diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high body mass index, and sarcopenia, as well as depressive disorders. So how do circadian clocks function? They are formed through a complex genetic mechanism, which has been explained as transcription, translational, feedback loops, which are gene driven. So let me try and simplify that, and it's not difficult to understand. So there are specific genes that encode circadian rhythms. The first one to have been discovered is called clock, circadian locomotor output cycles kaput. This gene encodes proteins that affect the length and the persistence of a circadian cycle. Then there's the second gene called BMAL1, brain and muscle aryl hydrocarbon receptor nuclear translocator-like factor. I didn't invent these names. These names have been invented by geneticists, so please pardon them. Then there is period, and there are three types of period: period 1, period 2, and period 3. And period is a negative element in the circadian transcription loop, which interacts with other circadian regulatory proteins and transports them back from the cytoplasm to the nucleus. And the discovery of this period molecule led to the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2017. And the second negative feedback protein is called cryptochrome, and there are two types, cryptochrome 1 and cryptochrome 2. This is a negative element which inhibits clock-mediated transcription in maintaining the period length and circadian rhythmicity. And there is a last protein called REV-ERB-A, which is also called orphan nuclear receptor, and this is a splice variant that regulates clock and BMAL1. So circadian clock and BMAL1 is produced in the nucleus. It transactivates gene expression. This gene expression is regulated by a negative feedback loop from the cytoplasm by period, cryptochrome, and ERB-REV. So that's shown here in this diagram, and it's a simplification to show what happens in the nucleus and how it gets translocated from the nucleus into the cytoplasm, and there is a feedback loop that regulates this. What is important is that the whole process of circadian rhythm is initiated when ambient light falls in the retina. There are melanopsin-rich photoganglion retinal cells which get activated, and that in the retinohypothalamic tract results in activation of two kinds of neurotransmitters, PACAP, which is pituitary adenylate cyclase activating peptide, and glutamate. And the suprachiasmatic nucleus is thought to have two components, a shell and a core, and they are rich in three different neurotransmitters: AVP, gastrin-related peptide or GRP, and vasoactive intestinal peptide. And in a complex, efferents from the suprachiasmatic nucleus are responsible for the coordination with peripheral oscillators. So the best way to understand this is that every organ system has a clock within it, be it the liver, the spleen, the gut, the muscle, the pancreas, and so on. The Kapellmeister, or the master conductor of this orchestra, is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And just like in an orchestra, the Kapellmeister uses the baton to synchronize all the members of the players in the chorus. The baton for the human brain seems to be melatonin. And we now know that these peripheral oscillators have an important role to play in metabolic biology. And this has been recognized from antiquity. All my Jain friends know that they follow this. And this diagram shows how circadian synchrony and circadian asynchrony can result in either a good metabolic balance or a metabolic balance disruption. So very simply, when we are awake, our job is to eat and to store energy. It's shown on the left-hand side column. When we are sleeping, we are supposed to be fasting, and what the brain and the peripheral organs are doing is that they are performing energy utilization. So if there is a circadian asynchrony and we are doing things late at night, like watching movies or studying, then there is a circadian asynchrony or disruption. It makes us consume food at night called night eating. There's restriction of sleep, there's fragmentation of sleep, feeding occurs, and this results in a disruption of these processes leading to being obese. So how does that occur? It's shown here. I think these next two slides are simple diagrammatic expressions of what can go wrong. On the left is circadian synchrony, on the right is circadian misalignment. So if you have the sleep wake, that is the feeding fasting cycle, and it gets disrupted, then it alters leptin resistance and the balance between leptin and ghrelin. Vascular tone changes in the heart, so it can result in atherosclerosis and elevated blood pressure due to misalignment. Cytokine production is harmonized when you have synchrony. This gets altered when you have misalignment, and it can result in insulin resistance and atherosclerosis. Fat storage and insulin sensitivity is fine-tuned when you have circadian synchrony, and this, when it becomes asynchronous, makes us obese and changes our feeding behavior. Insulin secretion by the pancreas gets altered, produces hyperglycemia. Gluconeogenesis and insulin sensitivity and fuel oxidation is harmonized in the liver when you have synchrony, but when you are asynchronous, it produces, on the right, dyslipidemia and steatosis. In the muscle, glucose disposal, insulin sensitivity, and fuel oxidation occurs harmoniously if you have good circadian synchrony. But if you are asynchronous, hyperglycemia and disrupted sleep produces sarcopenia. Nutrient absorption in the intestine changes, and there's altered lipid uptake. So we now know that there are numerous peptides in every peripheral oscillating clock that gives a feedback to the master clock. These are shown in the column on the left, and with each passing day, we are learning of new ones, and we are understanding how this complex, coordinated central and peripheral clocks determine our health. Melatonin is a complex multi-layered system of interaction between the central and peripheral clock, and it's the best example of how the SCN regulates the peripheral clocks and synchronizes them when we are asleep. And that is the reason why many Americans think that melatonin is anti-aging, because it helps us to decrease the process of aging at a cellular level. So what it means is that circadian rhythms have an effect on almost every aspect of cellular function: intercellular signaling, DNA damage, nutrient management, detoxification, and cellular redox, as shown here. Now, what has happened to us as industrial civilized people is that we have changed our circadian entrainment. On the top, you have rural or ancestral entrainment. That means the farmer works in the day, and as soon as it is night, within 2 hours of nighttime or 3 hours of nighttime, he goes to sleep. So what it shows on the right is that in the day he's awake and he's asleep in the night. Now, in industrial or civilized environments, what we are doing is that we are in the first half of sleeping time at night, we are staying awake, as it is shown here, from Monday to Friday. And we wake up early to go to work. So we are sleep deprived for 5 days of the week. And then on Saturday and Sunday, shown in the top bars in the lower column, Saturday and Sunday, we are sleeping longer into the day. And this kind of misalignment of our clock from Monday to Friday and over weekends has been called social jet lag. And even one night of such this misalignment can produce an increase in postprandial blood sugar and insulin concentration. And it's believed today that social jet lag is vitally linked to an increasing BMI in the population, despite people saying that they exercise regularly. And this is some very elegant work done from Munich, which has a questionnaire for these chronotypes. And this is Till Ronenberg's work, which shows that with increasing jet lag in a week time, there is a tendency, as shown here, with increasing BMI, that goes from overweight to frankly obese over a period of time. And this should give us pause to think. What is relevant is that almost every cell line of the immune system is also regulated by this complex circadian rhythm. And it is not surprising that disruption of circadian rhythms have been linked to these numerous disorders, which seemingly were idiopathic, but could be related to lifestyle changes that we have. Blood pressure and cardiovascular disease in chronic shift workers, circadian regulation of renal function, sleep-dependent T-cell regulatory activity, adipose tissue, all of this has been an intense focus of research, and it is believed that circadian misalignment produces severe metabolic and cardiovascular consequences, changes our immune system, and makes us vulnerable to a variety of ailments, including a dysfunctional immunology, as shown here in disrupted sleep cascading of immunological balance. And it can also change in the ICU, resulting in delirium vulnerability, because the circadian rhythms get disrupted in the ICU in a complex manner due to all the factors that is shown here. Now, what is important for us is that these scientists who studied circadian rhythms discovered this pituitary adenylyte cyclase activating peptide, which is responsible for the outflow from the retino-hypothalamic tract and the efferents from the suprachiasmatic nucleus, as shown earlier. Now, this seems to be the next frontier of research in circadian rhythms that link headaches. So there is a role for PACAP signaling in headaches. It's supposed to have two isoforms, 38 and 27. It's been shown to be elevated during a migraine attack, and it decreases interictally in episodic cluster with a subsequent increase in a cluster bout. And light entrainment of circadian rhythms with melanopsin-bearing retinal ganglion cells signal to the SCN via the retino-hypothalamic tract, and this requires secretion of pituitary adenylyte cyclase activating peptide. And it's also known that the efferents which signal melatonin secretion are also rich in PACAP. What we know in experimental models is that if you administer PACAP in a vulnerable person, it can induce migraine. And it is believed that disruption of this physiology could probably reflect the morning onset headaches in patients. And there is an emerging interest in research for hypnic headaches, for migraine, for neuropathic pain, and cluster headaches. All of these seem to have a peak time. For hypnic headaches, 2 o'clock, cluster headaches, 2 o'clock in the morning, for neuropathic pain, evening peak, and for migraine, morning and evening. And various circadian genes are being studied in these disorders in an attempt to see if we can treat these disorders better. Similarly, in the epilepsy field, there's a burgeoning interest in multi-day rhythms that modulate seizure risk. You know that Maxime Bord and Philippa Caroli's work in neuropace patients, where it's been shown that implanted electrodes show that interictal discharge of activity in these patients, even without seizures, seem to have circadian and circaseptan rhythms, rhythms that are regulated in 24 hours, rhythms that are regulated over 7 days, and rhythms that are regulated over months. And it is shown here for neocortical, mesotemporal, and average different epilepsies that there is a vulnerability for interictal spiking to occur at specific circadian times. And this perhaps will be the focus of research to come. We also know in a very recent study that dysfunction in the brain circuits for focal epilepsy that produces refractory epilepsy, some of them in epileptic brain tissue, the clock transcription factor expression is low. And bench researchers are trying to figure whether this clock transcription factor depletion in this tissue makes the tissue vulnerable to refractory seizures. So the take-home messages are that circadian rhythms are physiologically entrained complex sequence of biologically and hormonally mediated pattern. of behavior in the organelles and cells. This is regulated by a feedback loop. It's given a name: transcription, translocation, feedback loop. These rhythms have a bearing on neurological, endocrine, pulmonary, cardiovascular, hematological, and immune functions. And the current perception is that circadian rhythm disruption is linked with a variety of diseases more prevalent in civilized times. It affects most activities of daily living and in those who are critically ill. And we need to recognize this when we are treating our patients. Thank you for your attention. Sudhir?
Roop and Ashish, you all are taking the questions now.
Yeah, so yes, here I am. Okay, so Joy, that was an amazing lecture, and I think most people will agree that you're translating basic neuroscience of sleep into something that is comprehensible and clinically relevant for all of us. And it's pretty interesting that this is something that that you have been working at for some time now. We can also see how this feeds into your work in clinical neurology. And what I would want to ask you, maybe if you choose, you can address it at a later time. How do the rest of us, how do other people follow this path? How did you get interested in sleep?
Well,
Are there any? Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
start with how did you get interested? Let's get that done.
So I think I think all of us have something like a midlife crisis sometime in our 50s, and we really wonder that we need to reinvent some new passion in our day-to-day lives and academics. And what happened to us at Just Look is that Preeti Devnani left, and we used to refer most of our sleep patients to her. And suddenly, I was left in the clinic seeing patients and having to figure out what to do with them. And I just decided that it might make sense to study this, because if we are going to do justice to our patients, we need to know why we are seeing what we are seeing and why we are taking treatment decisions in a particular manner. And so if you study something, then I think it helps to understand it better. And the excitement is in, if you've learned something, then it's good to share it with others, because
Absolutely.
it can probably excite others too. And it could make a very big difference in the way we treat patients. I think if we translate this, it's very, very useful.
Okay. And
Also, Joy,
Yeah.
best way, I think Stephen Covey has said this, the best way to learn anything is to teach it to others.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Okay. So one more question that I have. One of the things that we've seen is that sleep neurology is a subspecialty in the US.
Yes.
And here, I think I can count on the fingers of one hand the neurologists I know personally who are interested. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's basically Manveer Bhatia in Delhi, you here, and
Yes.
Tarun Nagpal. And that's it.
Yes.
I don't know of anybody else. I'm willing to be corrected. So, if somebody else chooses to follow this path, maybe it will be good at some stage if you put up a list of resources, suggest learnings.
Yes.
And
so you should remember that Manveer Bhatia and Preeti Devnani as a group, they have a sleep school which they run in Delhi. I attended the sleep school in February this year, mainly to also get a feel of how they are teaching sleep neurology to physicians, to physiologists, and neurologists too. And they have a regular program which is held once in a year in Delhi. It's called the ACE Sleep School.
We're having a talk by Dr. Kothare today on sleep, parasomnias at 9 p.m. And Manveer Bhatia has agreed to be a chair, co-chair in that, because Nandani Ardi was going to do it, but I've requested Manvir Bhatia, so she'll also be.
Yes, that's very good.
So we'll get her inputs also.
Okay, so I'm the other part of it is, of course, sleep school and so on. But suppose somebody wants to do formal training in this, that's one. Then one of the things that I find important is that having other people, juniors, younger people who are just starting off careers, take this on as a significant subspecialty. That's the way it's going to grow, because
Yes.
otherwise, by default, it is going to pulmonology.
No.
And
So
this is our business.
I think it is our business.
Yes.
And in the next two talks, I'm going to discuss sleep and cognition and the lymphatics in the third one, and some cellular biology of sleep, which is relevant to all of us as neurologists. So I don't think we should, the pulmonologists don't necessarily know sleep physiology. They know the respiratory parts of it. And one of my colleagues, Anuradha, with whom I work, I think she's listening in today. And we all have to work together. I think there is definite room for working as a team. We cannot isolate that, okay, let this go to the pulmonologists. We need to work with them, understand from them, and work together. I think if you work as a team, even better for patients.
Good. So now sleep joins the list of vertigo, which we are reclaiming.
Anyway, I think Ashish has collated questions. Ashish, are you there? Will you take on?
Yes, sir.
Chalo.
We are not seeing you, Ashish.
Yeah, he's there.
He's here.
Yeah, I was just gathering the questions.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
share
Thank
your
you for an excellent talk. Sir, there are many questions. First, which I would like to ask, because I am also lark. One question has been asked: this lark versus owls, is it genetic phenomenon or an acquired? What is your take on this?
We don't know that. So the people who have done a very large amount of work are from Munich. That's one school who's been doing a lot of research. I would suggest that you can look at work published by Till Ronenberg. She's published a lot of stuff on this about social jet lag. And incorporated in that concept of social jet lag is this chronotype phenomenon. What is clear is that there is some disturbing data to show that if you are an owl, then somewhere the risk of all those metabolic problems and even mood changes tends to occur. Way back in the 1950s, André Gide, who was a French Nobel laureate for literature, he has once said that if I were not to make their acquaintance, my morning self would not know my evening self. So he was trying to say that our moods are different in the morning and in the evening. They too have a circadian rhythm. So I think there's so much that we don't know that it will take us some time to figure out that is there a gene for this? Is it acquired? But I believe that to some extent this can be modulated by your habits. But that's a hunch. I don't know.
Okay. Sir, further questions are, those people who are getting multiple dreams, is that an indicator of poor sleep?
Not really.
And
This whole dream thing.
yes, sir.
My I know I'm not a researcher. This REM sleep we know clearly is associated with dreaming traditionally, but the new data seems to show that even in non-REM sleep, dreaming occurs. So dreaming to the researchers seems to be a synaptic reorganization process. So what we are doing while we are dreaming is that we are sculpting our memories in a different way, removing the stuff which is not needed, consolidating the stuff that is needed, and at the same time decreasing the emotional content of our experiential memories so that we are more stable in our wakeful hours of the day. So I don't think people who dream more or dream less should consider that they're different. A lot of this is related to sleep deprivation. If you're sleep deprived, then REM sleep as a homeostatic drive tends to increase for some time in an attempt to catch up. So it helps
Okay, sir.
to be circadianly balanced. If you have synchronous circadian rhythms, then your sleep physiology is balanced.
Is it possible that people who there are lots of people who get I mean, for whom the dreaming is something that they almost obsessively look back at, and are more of them the lucid dreamers? Is that why the rest of us kind of forget our dreams and we are done with it?
No,
So-
lucid dreaming is not that. He will tell us about lucid dreaming.
He did.
Lucid, oh, I missed that
Well,
part.
so lucid dreaming is a kind of focus of very big research. I don't know much about it. What I know is that the core
If you allow
kernel
me,
of the
sir, sorry to interrupt.
conceptualization.
Sir, there is one question regarding this. Is there any difference in terms of intelligence or the cognitive profile of these lucid dreamers? If you could add this point also.
Okay, I am a lucid dreamer.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. No. Let's not run away with understanding which may not have a scientific basis. The thing is that in fMRI studies, the study that I showed you is a fairly recent study, which illustrates that the network in the brain that connects the frontopolar region to the parieto-occipital association areas is enhanced in lucid dreamers. So my take home was that it appears that lucid dreamers have a peculiar connectivity in their networks, which makes their vigilant parts of the brain be in synchrony with the process of dreaming when the parieto-occipital hotspot is churning. And therefore, they are aware of their dreams and they can actually recount them. Whether they can participate and modulate their dreams is one of the concepts of lucid dreaming. I don't know much about that, and I think time will tell us.
Okay, I have some comments here. I probably have some loose connection in my REM area. So I have been getting sleep paralysis earlier. Now they are less, luckily. I would get sleep hallucinations. And what I feel, I mean, I don't know whether this is true, you correct me, that when you go in REM sleep, there are three things that happen. One, you get unconscious and you are asleep actually. Secondly, you get paralyzed. And thirdly, you get the hallucinations, which we call dreams. Now, all three normally should happen simultaneously and synchronously. But sometimes you go into sleep, start getting hallucination, that the dreaming part, but you don't, you get paralyzed without being asleep. So that is sleep paralysis. Sleep hallucinations is you start getting the dreaming, but you are not yet asleep. So you are awake and you get those hallucinations. And the third thing, I get that also sometimes. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would start seeing, while seeing the dream starts. So you are awake and you can dream. So in lucid dreaming, it is the guy is alert and awake and yet can dream. And last thing, I can continue the dream. So as a child, I would see a dream where I was in a war and I'm fighting a war. And in children, you want to win the war and we are winning. And then you wake up. Then I would wake up and continue the war ahead. So you can continue the dream. So I don't know about lucid dreaming, but
No. I think let's not mislead the audience. No.
But what happens in sleep paralysis? What happens in sleep hallucinations? Can you explain?
Let him.
Let's not mislead the audience. I think what the audience needs to understand is that hear me out.
Yeah.
Please hear me out. I showed that in the slide. I showed that if a regional part of the brain is asynchronous in its electrical activity, either in wakefulness or in sleep, it results in these phenomenologies being seen. It explains hypnagogic hallucinations, hypnopompic hallucinations. It explains sleep inertia, and it to some extent explains parasomnia.
So
Now, what it's telling us is that different people seem to be wired differently in this asynchronous process of awakening and sleeping. So in some, you can see these phenomenologies. In others, you don't see that. whether this has some relationship to disease. It has relationship to cataplexy, which has those narcolepsy, for example, where you know that you have other phenomenologies like cataplexy, hypnopompic and hypnagogic hallucinations, and some of them also have sleep inertia. So in some, there can be an exaggeration of this phenomenology which reflects at the bedside. In others, it may occur sometimes, but we just don't know enough to be able to say to next 5 to 10 years, we learn more about it.
Okay, Ashish, go to the next.
Yes, what Sudhir sir just said, related to that, on lighter note, someone has commented, is there anything called dream within dream, like the movie Inception?
Well, yes.
Perhaps, yeah, related or
Yes, I did
research.
mention that. I was actually toying with the idea of putting a slide about Inception. So it is believed that a lot of the script writing of Inception was exaggeration and modulation by the script writers of a Scientific American article which talked about lucid dreaming and being aware of dreaming and being able to participate and take part in it. So the script writers then decided to write a script in which uh, individuals can actually modulate and shift from one dream to another. So I think there's something there. I think they learned about it and then they kind of imaginatively took it further, so to speak.
Yeah. So the Inception never had any end. The title aptly mentioned.
Yeah, I think they're
Yes.
waiting for a redo. They will come out with a second one after 3 years.
Sir, regarding one question, like our nurses, our doctors, or let's say police and army personnel, many of them have night duties.
Yes.
So is there any study on such personnel?
Yes.
And second thing related to this is what can how we can help them when they have daytime sleepiness? Would melatonin help?
Yes. So what took the world of research by storm was the Norwegian shift worker study. So you should look it up. If you Google it, you will find it. The study from Norway showed that shift workers, surprisingly, the females have a higher incidence of breast cancer and males have a higher incidence of lung cancer. So the next question that researchers asked that, hello, what is it that makes shift workers be more vulnerable to carcinoma? So it appears there's a recent paper in Nature Communications just about a few months ago of a single cell study in zebrafish, which shows that sleep actually produces DNA repair. And as a result of these thoughts, some of the researchers in Berkeley have shown that if you have disrupted sleep circadian rhythms, the transcription of oncogenes goes up. That means genes that produce cell growth, which is proliferative, those genes get upregulated in disrupted circadian rhythms. That seems to be making, in fact, there is a lobby that is actually creating an environment to disallow shift work, and their concept is that all the nighttime work should be done by programs and not by humans, because humans need to preserve their health by not working at night. Now, this is not happened yet, but I foresee in future that it's going to happen.
But so then what do you advise?
We should look
for
up the
this?
Norwegian.
Yes, sir. So people who are having excess daytime sleep
Well,
because
so
of night.
melatonin is,
Yeah.
yes, but the problem is that if you give people melatonin to sleep in the day, because they have stayed awake at night, what you're actually doing is disrupting their endogenous circadian rhythm even further. So ideally, if a shift worker has some kind of health problem, then ideally we should disallow them from doing shift work and try to put them on a harmonious schedule of daytime work and nighttime sleep to get their health back.
Okay. So there is one more related question. Those who are exercising at late evening, let's say 9 p.m., 10 p.m.,
Yeah.
would it disturb the sleep synchronization? And is it
Yes.
bad to have late evening, late night exercises?
Right. So that's a very interesting question. I've been kind of battling that for the last 5-6 months. And there is a lot of data on this, which I've studied. I purposely didn't put it in the slide because the data is a little complicated. So I'll try and quickly tell you the snippets of it which are relevant. So there is one study which clearly shows that there is a peripheral oscillator in the muscle also. And if you look at circadian cycling, then the muscle peak strength and endurance is optimal between 1 in the afternoon and 3 in the afternoon, between 1 and 3, not in the morning. So there are other studies that were done to answer this question: should we exercise in the morning or should we exercise in the evening? So in one of the studies, the people who exercised after 7 p.m. had problems falling asleep because they were hyper vigilant and alert till about 1 o'clock at night. So it is clearly recommended that don't exercise late in the evening because you might not be able to garner right time sleep. And there is one study which shows that people who exercise in a disciplined manner in the morning tend to have a more rhythmic, entrained circadian rhythm. So even though they are not at their best peak in the morning, because their peak is in the afternoon, even if they exercise in the morning, their circadian entrainment is good, which means that most of us should be exercising in the morning and sleeping by 10:30. I hope you get that.
For doctors, I doubt that would happen. So one more thing, is it necessary to have 7 to 8 hours sleep at one stretch, or it can be taken in multiple fragments and still it will help?
No, you just saw the social jet lag data. So
Yes.
social jet lag occurs because people believe that I will catch up on my sleep on Saturday, Sunday. We clearly know from social jet lag data that it's bad for your metabolism. So if you ask me, my firm belief could be right, could be wrong. I don't know because I'm not a researcher. I'm only someone who studies research in order to understand what's going on in the world. But it's very clear from the data that circadian rhythms are a index of our health, definitely metabolic health, and how we age. So people who sleep in a non-synchronized manner are likely to show greater visible signs of aging, skin, cardiovascular disease, obesity, early atherosclerosis, the works. That's why I had put that table.
So next, I think we can take something related to movement disorders. And today is World Parkinson's Day. People are asking, what are the neural correlates of sleep disturbance in Parkinson's disease, and what we can offer them for sleep fragmentation or excessive daytime sleepiness other than drug modification?
Yeah. So there are two papers worth studying. One is a paper on circadian rhythm disruption in Parkinson's disease published in JAMA. I don't remember the author's name right now, but many of you might remember Dr. Singhal's update where he had invited one of the researchers from Thailand who spoke about the nocturnal problems in patients with Parkinson's disease, and he showed very elegant videos where it at night. So there is a very clear understanding that sleep disruption, we know that synuclein tends to begin in the pedunculopontine nucleus, and Brack's hypothesis is that it spreads caudorostrally from the brainstem into the neocortex. So it is to be expected that patients who have Parkinson's disease probably experience different forms of sleep
Sir, I doubt
disruption.
your connection is poor.
It is
We are not
a subject
Sir?
of study, and I don't have a very good understanding of it.
I think last line we missed, sir, because of poor connection.
Yeah, so it is a kind of emerging science, and a lot of people are looking into it. I know only small bits. I don't know a great deal to be able to make any comment. Maybe you should ask Kailash Bhatia. He might know more about that.
Yes, sir, we shall do that. Sir, one more thing related to this, like restless leg syndrome or the phenomenology of sleep benefits in neurological disorders. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so maybe you should ask Dr. Manveer Bhatia, who I'm sure is part of the meeting. She invited one of the sleep specialists from Spain to speak about RLS in the sleep update this February. And from what I could gather from the data that was reviewed, is that though there is a belief that there is a peripheral nerve hypodopaminergic dysfunction in RLS, a lot of new data seems to clearly imply the role of abnormal iron stores in patients who have RLS. And Diego Garcia was the professor of sleep neurology who spoke in February. He showed that in most patients, if you replace iron, then their RLS improves greatly.
Benefits are there.
So it's not just about giving ropinirole or
Dopamine
pramipexole
agonist, yeah.
at night.
Yeah. The ferritin level is very important. If the
But you
ferritin level is
need
less than
to
50,
correct serum iron and ferritin stores as well.
yeah.
Yes. So
Sir, what circadian interventions you advise to your patients?
I have a few things which I write in my prescription actually. I say that avoid screen time after 9:30 if you can. Try and sleep by 10:30. And I give melatonin even earlier, 8:30 or so. I think this whole Jain philosophy of eating early, sleeping on time, waking up early, and exercising in the morning is what all of us should be following. I think Mahavir Jain got it right. And most of the Jains, I think, have got their right idea about circadian rhythms.
Not me.
I think during this lockdown, many of us are perhaps not following this schedule.
I'm spoiling people's circadian rhythms.
Right.
Sir, what do you think this circadian advices or betterment in their circadian rhythms? Is there any study which says that the somatic or the cognitive profile becomes better?
I don't know. I don't know. I
Okay.
can't say. I have no idea.
Sir, there is one patient regarding seizure patients, those who undergo anterotemporal lobectomy and hippocampoectomy. What happens to their sleep? Is there any study or
Yes.
your experience comments?
This whole hippocampal spindling and sleep spindles have become a kind of focus of research. So researchers are trying, and a lot of this sleep data actually came from epilepsy patients because you had implanted electrodes in the hippocampi. Hippocampal ripples got discovered, and the data on nesting of ripples with slow wave activity also came from epilepsy patients. So this whole modulation of oscillations in the brain, it's an intense area of research, and the people in California think that the prefrontal cortex is the main slow wave oscillation generator. So if your prefrontal cortex atrophies, then your sleep becomes poor. I showed that in my last lecture. I showed that slide of prefrontal cortex. And I showed you that exercise, meditation, mindfulness, and following your passions seem to improve prefrontal cortex um, activity. Whereas depression and binging with alcohol decreases prefrontal cortex activity. So there's so much that is developing just now in this area that it seems to reflect on all the things that we know in our lifestyle, which we have observed, but we didn't have a scientific explanation. Now we are getting a scientific explanation.
Sir, in EEG, a patient is like during awake record, if there is any focal slowing, is there any context related to segmental sleep or this dissociation?
That's what I implied, though, that many times we see asymmetric slowing and we pass it off. Now, I showed that in studies clearly show that if you are sleep deprived, then the area of the brain which you have been using the most, it's infringed by slow wave activity, like local sleep. So somewhere we will learn about this in time, but the dense array EEGs seem to imply that.
Sir, what percent of brain is really involved in sleep? Like, is it entire connectome, how it is?
I don't know. I don't think I'm the right guy to answer that question. I'm not sure.
Okay. So there is one more question. Your comment on sinking phenomenon or something like people feel like they're about to fall, maybe sleep myoclonus.
I don't really know. I have not come across something where I can comment on that right now.
Okay. I'll ask Roop sir and Sudhir sir, should we take further questions or?
No, I think we are done. And let's leave. There are another 2 lectures, so people will come up with more questions. So we will, maybe depending on how it goes, we could have probably a panel discussion with others also and do a joint session. Let's figure this out. But right now, Joy will of course have more questions in the next 2 lectures. Right. So Ashish, you'll do the.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank Dr. Joy sir for asking us to wake up early and listen to lecture on sleep and giving so many insights on local sleep and this fragmentations and all the clinical implications. And we could not take all questions from our listeners, but we could take many of them. So I really thank sir, and thank you to fine team, Sudhir sir and Roop sir. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you all of you for listening. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, signing off.